My name is Margaret, and like most stories in life, mine begins on what seemed like an ordinary morning. But for me, that day was one I'll never forget. I was 66 years old. I had lived long enough to understand that life doesn't always go the way you expect. But I'd also lived long enough to know that no matter what happens, you can always stand back up. That was one of the lessons I learned after years of working hard, loving my family, and giving everything I had for my daughter, Grace. My life wasn't anything special. I was a woman who cleaned houses, a mother who worked tirelessly to make sure my daughter had everything she needed. But what made me most proud was raising Grace. From a little girl with nothing to a woman with an education, a career, and the kind of life I could only dream of. I worked every day, from dawn to dusk. On nights when the house was finally quiet and everyone was asleep, I'd still be scrubbing floors, folding laundry, cleaning houses. But through all those years, I never felt sorry for myself. Never once. Because the love I had for Grace, for my family, was all I needed. We went through a lot of hard times. When Grace was little, her father walked out, leaving me to do it all. I sold my jewelry, took out loans to pay for her education. I never thought twice about it, because if I could give her a better life, I'd do whatever it took. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. I did it all for her, for Grace. But there's something I never expected, something that, to this day, still doesn't seem real. The person I loved most in this world, the one I gave up everything for, was the one who would break my heart in ways I never saw coming. I remember that morning so clearly. It started just like any other. But by the end of the day, everything had changed. I was sitting in the kitchen, having my coffee, when I got a voice message from Grace. At first, I thought it was just her asking about dinner, or letting me know they'd be late. But when I hit play, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't for me. It was meant for Richard, her husband, and what I heard changed everything. The words I heard that day still echo in my mind. It was as if the floor had been pulled out from under me, and I was falling into a void. "I can't take having my mother in this house anymore," Grace's voice began, the words cutting through me like glass. She didn't know I was listening, didn't know her secret had slipped out. She's a nuisance. She gets into everything, and on top of that, we're already spending so much money on her. I could barely breathe as the rest of the message played. Every sentence was a blow to my heart, one after another. "I found a place. Only $800 a month. That's enough to free us from having her here." In that moment, I felt my entire world collapse. This was the same daughter for whom I had worked endless hours, cleaning other people's homes, doing anything I could to make sure she had what she needed. I had sold my jewelry, spent my last savings, all to give her a better life. The same daughter who had cried in my arms when Richard left her at the altar the first time. I was the one who convinced him to come back, using money I didn't have. But I did it because I wanted her to be happy. And now, here she was, planning to have me removed from her life. But it didn't stop there. "Also," Grace continued in the message, "I've checked the house papers. It's in her name, but I found a way to transfer it to our name without her realizing." My hands trembled so violently I almost dropped the phone. I had built this house, brick by brick. Sweat on my brow, day in and day out. I spent 30 years making sure that Grace would have a place to call home. This was all I had left. And now, my own daughter was planning to take it from me. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the fact that I had spent so many years giving her everything, thinking it would come back to me in love and respect. But this was something else entirely. And then, as if to add salt to the wound, I heard her laugh. It was cold, calculating. "In a month, Mom will be in the home and will own everything. We can finally live in peace without that bitter old woman controlling us." I thought I might choke. My heart shattered in a way I didn't know was possible. I sat there in the kitchen, still clutching the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. But as the shock began to fade, something else took its place. Rage. Not the kind of fury that makes you scream and shout, but a quiet, cold rage that comes from knowing you've been used, manipulated, and discarded by the very person you loved the most. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung. It was the years of sacrifices, the endless work, and the love I had poured into Grace. And now, she was treating me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I needed to understand how we had gotten here. How had this sweet little girl, the one I held in my arms when she was born, become the woman who would laugh at the thought of sending me away to a nursing home? So I sat there, staring at the kitchen table, and let my mind drift back to the past. The moments that shaped me, shaped her, and shaped our relationship. I remember when I first found out I was pregnant with Grace. I was just 18. Her father? Gone, vanished. One day, he was promising marriage, and the next, he was nowhere to be found. His parents slammed the door in my face when I went to ask for help. They told me he wasn't going to ruin his future for a random girl. I was devastated. But that was when my mother stepped in. She told me, "That child is going to have everything we couldn't. We'll raise her together so she can be a good woman." And that's exactly what we did. My mother worked as a seamstress from dawn until late at night, stitching clothes for pennies, just so I could have what I needed. And when Grace was born, she was the light of our lives. My mother and I took turns taking care of her while I worked cleaning houses, making barely $20 a day. I was always tired, always aching, but every cent I earned was for her. I remember walking Grace to kindergarten for the first time. We didn't have money for the bus, so we walked. She wore her uniform, perfectly pressed, and her shoes were shined. The other mothers arrived in fancy cars, dressed in expensive clothes, and there I was, dressed in a patched-up dress, my hands calloused and raw. But when Grace kissed me on the cheek and said, "Thank you, Mom. You're the best in the world," I felt like the richest woman on earth. Years passed and the routine never changed. Wake up at 4 a.m., get Grace ready for school, clean 3 different houses, pick her up from school, help with homework, and put her to bed with a story. Every day, every week, every month, it was the same. But I never minded, because it was all for her, all so she could have a better life than mine. When Grace turned 15, I saved for 6 months to give her a sweet 16 party. It cost me $3,500. It was more than I had, but it was worth it to see the smile on her face when she walked into that party in her golden dress. "Mom," she said that night, hugging me, "I don't know how you give me so much when you have nothing. When I grow up, I'm going to give it all back to you, multiplied by 1,000. Those words, her promise, they meant everything to me. They kept me going through the hardest years. I believed them. I believed she would be there for me when I needed her, the same way I had always been there for her. But now, hearing that voice message, hearing her laugh as she talked about sending me away, it all felt like a lie. That night, I didn't sleep a single minute. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with every word I had heard. Her voice, so cold, so calculated, played over and over in my head like a broken record. In a month, Mom will be in the home and will own everything. Every syllable cut into me deeper than the last. For hours, I wrestled with the same questions. How could she? Why me? But as the hours passed and the darkness of night gave way to the faint light of dawn, my tears dried. Something inside me shifted. I realized that if I stayed silent, if I did nothing, I would be giving Grace exactly what she wanted. And after 66 years in this world, I knew one thing for sure. Sometimes the only way to defend yourself is to be just as cunning as those trying to destroy you. At 5 a.m, I swung my legs out of bed and stood up with a determination I hadn't felt in years. My body ached from sleeplessness, but my spirit was on fire. I opened my closet and pulled out my crimson pantsuit, the one I had worn to Grace's college graduation years ago. Back then, it was a symbol of pride. Today, it was armor. I put it on slowly, buttoning the jacket with hands that no longer shook. I styled my hair, dabbed on makeup, and clipped on my mother's pearl earrings, the ones she left me before she died. They weren't just jewelry. They were a reminder of the woman who taught me that dignity is not something you give away. It's something you fight to keep. I walked through the house, gathering my important documents, my ID, my bank papers, my property deed. Each sheet of paper was proof that I was still in control of my own life. Then I slipped them into my purse, set a small note on the kitchen table, left early to take care of personal matters, back later, love Mom, and stepped out the door. The cool morning air hit my face, and for the first time in months, I felt free. My first stop was the bank. Nora, the manager, had known me for 15 years. She greeted me with a smile, not realizing this visit wasn't routine. "Nora," I said, steady but firm, "I need you to review all the transactions on my account for the last 6 months, and I need to change all my beneficiaries today." Her smile faded. She pulled up my file, frowned, and then looked back at me. "Ms. Baker, there have been multiple inquiries made on your account by your daughter. She even presented a letter signed by you authorizing her access." My heart sank, but I didn't waver. "Nora, I never signed any such letter. Show me the document." She slid it across the counter. I took one look at it and almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the forgery was so sloppy. The slant of the letters, the uneven strokes. It wasn't my handwriting. "This is a fake," I told her, holding up my ID to compare. "Cancel every single authorization immediately. Put a security alert on my account. From this moment on, Grace has no access to anything tied to me." Nora nodded, her expression grave. "Yes, Ms. Baker, we'll secure your account right now, but I strongly recommend filing a fraud report." "I intend to," I replied, "but first I need to protect my assets." Within the hour, I had transferred every dollar, $8,750, to a brand new account that only I could access. I changed all my passwords, and most importantly, I removed Grace as the beneficiary of my life insurance. Instead, I named a foundation for abandoned seniors. My daughter would not see a single cent of my money again. As I walked out of that bank, a strange calm settled over me. For months, I had felt like a prisoner in my own home, but now, with each step, I was reclaiming my freedom, and the bank was only the beginning. My second stop that morning was the county clerk's office. That was where Carol, my niece, Grace's cousin, worked. The same cousin Grace had mentioned in the message. The same cousin who was supposed to help transfer my house out of my name. I walked in wearing my crimson suit, my pearls gleaming under the office lights. To anyone else, I looked like a woman there for routine business. But inside, I was a storm. Carol's eyes went wide the moment she saw me at her desk. She fumbled with the papers in front of her, shoving them into a folder as if that would hide them. "Aunt Margaret," she stammered, her smile tight, "what are you doing here? Grace didn't tell me you were coming." I set my purse down slowly, leaning forward just enough for her to feel my presence. "Don't worry about Grace. I'm here because I want to understand what's happening with my property. My daughter told me you were helping with some paperwork. Care to explain?" Her hands trembled as she smoothed the folder's edge. "It's just routine updates for the registry. Nothing important." I let out a quiet laugh. "Routine updates? Carol, I know. I know about the forged signatures, the false reports, the plan to take my house. I know you've been helping them." Her face drained of color. "What? No, Aunt, you don't—" I didn't let her finish. I pulled my phone from my purse and played the voice message. Grace's voice filled the air. "My cousin Carol, who works at the county clerk's office, is going to help me." I watched as Carol slumped back in her chair, her composure cracking. Her lips trembled, and tears welled in her eyes. "Aunt Margaret," she whispered, I didn't want to do it. Grace told me you couldn't take care of yourself anymore. She said it was for your own good. I swear I didn't mean to hurt you. For my own good? My voice sharpened, but I didn't raise it. No, Carol. It was for money. Don't stand there and pretend otherwise. You knew exactly what you were doing. She broke then, shoulders shaking, tears streaming. I have 3 kids to feed. I didn't know how to say no. Grace promised me $2,000 once the transfer went through. The anger in me was like ice. Controlled. Focused. Listen to me carefully, I said, leaning in. You have 2 choices. Help me fix everything you've done, or I walk straight to your boss with the evidence I have, and you lose your job, your reputation, and maybe even your freedom. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but she nodded quickly. I'll help you. Please, just don't ruin me. For the next 2 hours, she undid the damage. She invalidated every fraudulent document. She gave me copies of all the files they had forged, medical reports, property transfers, everything. And then she confessed in detail how Grace and Richard had pressured her, how they had mapped out every step to have me declared incompetent. By the time I walked out of that office, I wasn't just holding papers, I was holding weapons, proof. As I stepped back into the sunlight, I looked up at the sky and whispered, Mama, you were right. Dignity is something worth fighting for. And my fight wasn't over yet. By the time I left the county clerk's office, the morning sun was high, casting long shadows on the pavement. My purse felt heavier than it had ever been, but it wasn't just the weight of documents. It was the weight of proof. Proof that my own daughter had plotted to strip me of everything I owned, everything I had worked for. I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. Love and rage were not enough. I needed the law on my side. That's when I headed straight to the office of Harrison Ford, not the actor, but one of the most respected attorneys in the city. People said if you wanted justice, he was the man to see. When I walked into his office, he rose from behind his mahogany desk, extending a hand with a firm, steady grip. Ms. Baker, please, sit down. I hear you have quite a situation on your hands. I placed the thick stack of documents on his desk. Mr. Ford, I don't just have a situation. I have a daughter and son-in-law who are trying to steal my life. His eyes sharpened as he adjusted his glasses and began leafing through the papers. Forged signatures, fraudulent medical reports, property transfer forms. Each page he turned seemed to harden his expression. Ms. Baker, he said after a long pause, this is one of the clearest cases of family fraud I've seen in years. You have more than enough evidence to press both civil and criminal charges. I leaned forward, my voice steady, but my hands clenched tight in my lap. I don't just want them punished. I want my dignity back. I want my daughter to understand that actions have consequences. For 66 years, I've given everything. My sweat, my health, my heart. It's time I stand up for myself. For the first time since I arrived, a small smile touched his lips. Good. Because with this evidence, we can do more than just defend you. We can make sure the court and the world sees the truth. Over the next few hours, we mapped out a plan. Harrison prepared a civil lawsuit for fraud, forgery, and attempted illegal appropriation. He also began drafting a criminal complaint against Grace, Richard, and Carol. As he laid out the legal path ahead, I sat quietly, letting his words sink in. There was power in this moment, power I hadn't felt in months. For the first time, I wasn't a victim waiting for the axe to fall. I was a woman taking charge of her own story. When our meeting ended, Harrison stood and extended his hand again. Ms. Baker, you're not alone in this anymore. We'll make sure justice is done. I shook his hand, and for the first time in a long while, I believed him. Walking out of that office, I felt taller, stronger. I wasn't just Margaret, the tired old woman they thought they could push aside. I was Margaret Baker, a fighter armed with truth and law. That evening, when I returned home, Grace and Richard were sitting in the living room, laughing at something on TV. Grace looked up with her usual practiced smile. Hi, Mom. How were your errands? Very productive, I answered, lowering myself into my favorite chair. I studied their faces, memorizing every detail. By the way, we'll have some visitors tomorrow morning. Be sure you're home. Visitors? Richard frowned. Who? You'll see, I said softly, a small smile tugging at my lips. And that night, for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. Because I knew. Tomorrow, the storm would arrive. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. For once, it wasn't anxiety that pulled me out of bed. It was clarity. I brewed a pot of coffee, set out my pearl earrings once more, and waited. My house was quiet, but I knew soon enough it would become the stage for truth. At exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. My heart beat steady, not frantic. I rose, walked to the door, and opened it to find Attorney Harrison Ford standing tall, flanked by 2 police officers and a public notary. Good morning, Ms. Baker, he said with calm authority. Behind me, I heard Grace's voice from the living room. Mom? Who is it? I stepped aside, motioning for them to enter. They're here for us, honey. Grace and Richard came into the hallway, their faces twisting from confusion to unease as they saw the uniforms and briefcases. Mom, what's going on? Grace asked, her voice quivering just slightly. Sit down, I told them. My tone was one they'd never heard from me before. Firm, commanding. They obeyed, though I saw Richard's jaw tighten. Attorney Ford opened his folder and began. Ms. Grace Baker, Mr. Richard Williams, we are here to present evidence of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy against Ms. Margaret Baker. Grace's face went pale. What are you talking about? We'd never... Grace, I interrupted quietly, reaching into my purse. Do you really want me to play the voice message you sent me by mistake? Her mouth opened, then closed. All the color drained from her cheeks. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, cold and sharp. Richard, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. She's a nuisance. Grace lunged forward, panic in her eyes. Turn it off. That's private. One of the officers held out a hand, stopping her. Private, I said, my smile bitter. Honey, when you plot to steal your mother's house, that isn't private. It's criminal. Richard tried to jump in. This is ridiculous. You're twisting her words. Attorney Ford calmly laid out the next set of documents, the forged bank authorization, side by side with my real signature. The differences are clear, he said. Grace stammered. Mom asked me to help with her accounts because she forgets things. Stop lying, I cut in, my voice sharper than I thought possible. Enough. Then came Carol's signed confession, her words spilling from the recorder in my purse. Grace showed me how to forge your signature. She promised me money once the house was transferred. Grace's hand shot up to cover her face. Richard sank back into the sofa, muttering curses under his breath. Finally, Attorney Ford produced the fraudulent medical reports, then countered them with a brand new evaluation from a hospital specialist, declaring me mentally fit. The silence was unbearable. Grace began to cry, but it wasn't guilt. It was desperation. Mom, please. We just wanted to take care of you. We thought it would be better if... Take care of me? My voice cracked, but I didn't falter. By locking me away, stealing my house, and hoping I'd die soon so you could collect my life insurance? That's not care. That's cruelty. The officers moved forward. Ms. Baker, do you wish to proceed with arrests? I looked at my daughter, the same little girl I once carried to school in polished shoes and a hand-stitched dress. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to nod. Yes, officer, proceed. Handcuffs clicked shut. Grace sobbed, begging. Richard glared at me with venom. As they were led out the door, I felt a mix of grief and relief. My heart ached, but my soul was finally free. The silence that followed their arrest was unlike anything I had felt in months. My house was finally mine again. Quiet, steady, peaceful. For one night, I slept without fear. But peace, I would soon learn, was only temporary. The very next day, the war began. It started with social media. Grace had created a fake profile, posting stories in community groups. My mother suffers from dementia. She doesn't recognize her own family and has falsely accused us of theft. Please, if you see her wandering alone, call me immediately. She isn't safe on her own. The post included unflattering pictures of me, snapped when I wasn't aware, me sitting tired in the garden, me staring off mid-thought. They edited the lighting to make me look confused, frail, and strangers believed it. Comments poured in. Poor woman, she looks lost. How sad for the family, having to endure false accusations. My neighbor, Ms. Rose, knocked on my door that afternoon, worry etched across her face. Margaret, honey, are you all right? I saw some terrible things online. About you. So I sat her down at my kitchen table, the same spot where I had once nearly collapsed with shock, and I showed her the evidence. The recordings, the forged papers. Slowly she nodded, her face softening from suspicion into outrage. How could they, after everything you've done for that girl? But the smear campaign didn't stop with Facebook. Phone calls began in the middle of the night, voices I didn't recognize, dripping with venom. You're a miserable old woman, one woman screamed at 3 a.m. No wonder your daughter wants nothing to do with you. I hope you die alone. My hands shook as I hung up the phone. Sleep became impossible. Then came the visitors. Fake social workers knocking on my door saying they'd received reports that I was at risk. Aggressive salesmen trying to push overpriced security systems, hinting I was vulnerable. Even strangers pretending to be distant relatives showing up to check on my mental state. It was harassment, plain and simple. Attorney Ford listened carefully when I told him everything. He steepled his fingers and said, Ms. Baker, this is a classic tactic. They're trying to create a narrative that you're unstable. They want to discredit your testimony before trial. I nodded, but my chest ached with the weight of it all. It wasn't just strategy, it was personal. Every lie, every rumor was a dagger meant to pierce my dignity. And then came the letters, anonymous, cruel, dripping with poison. You raised a daughter who hates you so much she'd rather see you dead. Think about what you did wrong. Another. No one will miss you when you die. You worked your whole life as a servant, and for what? To be abandoned? You're a fool. One night, I sat on the kitchen floor, clutching a letter like it was a knife. Tears blurred the words as I whispered to myself, what did I do wrong? How could I have raised a daughter who hates me this much? For the first time since this battle began, doubt crept in. Maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe pressing charges was a mistake. Maybe Grace really had loved me in her own way, and I had misunderstood. I reached for my phone, ready to call Attorney Ford, ready to say I wanted to drop everything. But then my eyes landed on the small chest in my bedroom, the one where I kept the most precious memories of my life. And inside, I remembered, was a letter from my mother. I don't know how long I sat there, reading those letters over and over, each word more suffocating than the last. The messages and phone calls were one thing, but these letters, these poison-filled notes, seemed to twist my insides in ways nothing else had. For a moment, I wondered if the damage was done. Had I really misjudged everything? Had I been too harsh in my fight for justice? Was I truly the villain in all this? I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked to my room. I needed to take a breath, clear my head. I didn't know it then, but I was walking towards something that would change everything. The small chest at the foot of my bed, the one that held my most treasured memories, the photographs, the trinkets, the things that couldn't be replaced. It was there, buried under the things I thought I had forgotten, that I found the letter. The handwriting was shaky, like my mother's had been in her final months. She had written it when Grace was only 8, before she passed away, when my mother could see how hard life was becoming for me. I unfolded the paper slowly. The ink had faded over time, but the words were still clear in my mind as I read them aloud to myself, even though I hadn't spoken them in years. My dearest Margaret, if you are reading this, it is because I am no longer with you. But I want you to know that I am so proud of the woman and mother you are. You have raised Grace with so much love and dedication that I am sure she will be a good woman who will honor you for life. But if things ever get difficult, if someone tries to hurt you or take advantage of your good heart, remember that you are stronger than you think. Don't allow anyone, not even your own daughter, to trample on your dignity. True love never seeks to destroy. True love respects, protects, and seeks the well-being of the other without expecting anything in return. Margaret, you deserve respect. You deserve genuine love. You deserve to live your final years in peace and dignity. If someone can't give you that, then they don't deserve to have you in their life, no matter how much blood they share with you. I stopped reading and let the words settle over me. My mother had seen the signs. She had known what kind of woman I was becoming, the kind of mother I was being for Grace. But more than that, she had seen how much I would give and how I would let people take until there was nothing left. But what my mother had also known was that I had the strength to stand up for myself, that the love I gave to others, especially Grace, shouldn't come at the cost of my own dignity. And now, more than ever, I understood. I wiped my eyes and smiled. It wasn't the smile of a victim. It wasn't the smile of a broken woman. It was the smile of someone who was reclaiming her life. My mother had given me the courage I needed to do what was right, not just for me, but for anyone who had ever been betrayed, silenced, or used. The greatest inheritance my mother had left me wasn't just the house or the money. It was her unwavering belief in my worth, in my strength, in my ability to choose dignity over suffering. And now it was time to move forward. I took the letter in my hands and folded it carefully, tucking it away in the chest where I kept all my memories. I didn't need it anymore to remind me of who I was. I had already remembered. I woke up the next morning with the sense of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. The chaos of the last few days, the phone calls, the letters, the betrayal seemed distant now. The weight on my chest had lifted, replaced by something stronger. I walked into the kitchen and made my usual cup of coffee, the sunlight streaming through the windows as I took my first sip. I looked around the house, the one I had worked so hard to create. There were still remnants of the battle I had fought. Paper scattered on the table, my phone buzzing with calls and messages, but for the first time, it all felt irrelevant. This house, this life, was mine. I had built it. I had earned it. And now it was time to truly make it mine again. After taking a deep breath, I reached for my phone. I hadn't wanted to speak to Grace since the confrontation, but I knew there were still things that needed to be said. I owed it to myself to have closure, and I owed it to her too, no matter how much it hurt. I dialed her number and waited. The line rang, and my heart beat a little faster than I expected. She picked up on the third ring. "Mom!" Grace's voice was thin, uncertain. "Grace," I said, my voice steady, even though my hands shook. "I've been thinking about everything, about what you did, about what happened. I won't say I'm not hurt. I won't say I'm not devastated, but I'm also not going to let this define me. I've made mistakes too, you know. I gave you everything I had, and I thought that would be enough. I thought you loved me." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, I don't know what to say." Her voice cracked, and I heard the desperation in it. I took a deep breath. "Grace, I forgave you a long time ago. I just want you to know that. But forgiveness doesn't mean I can forget. Forgiveness doesn't mean I can trust you again. I have to move forward with my life, and you have to move forward with yours. But from now on, it will be without me." There was a long pause, and I could hear the sobs trying to break through her voice. But I didn't let them break me. I couldn't. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I never meant to hurt you. I don't know what happened to me." "You don't know what happened," I repeated, feeling a coldness settle in my chest. "Grace, you knew exactly what you were doing, and you chose it anyway. Now you're going to have to live with that. But don't think for a second that it's going to break me. I'm stronger than you think." The words were like a hammer to her, and I knew it. But they were the truth, the painful, honest truth. I hung up the phone without another word, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was finally putting myself first. The days after my conversation with Grace were strange. There was no instant relief, no sense of finality, but there was peace. A peace I hadn't felt in so long. I had made the decision to let go of what had happened. Not to forget, but to accept it as part of my story, not my identity. And once I made that decision, the world seemed a little brighter, a little clearer. I began to focus on myself in ways I hadn't for years. First, I sold the house, the one I had poured my heart into for 30 years. The decision wasn't easy. It wasn't even something I thought I'd be capable of doing, but it was the right one. I needed a fresh start. With the money from the sale, along with the damages from the lawsuit, I found a small apartment in a peaceful part of town. It was modest, just enough for me, but it was mine. Every corner of it was a testament to the new life I was building. I painted the walls myself, soft, calming colors. I rearranged the furniture, carefully placing each piece in a way that made it feel like home. I hung photos of my past, of the moments that had shaped me, but I also made space for new memories. And every day I did something that had once seemed impossible. I took dance classes. At 67, I was learning to move in ways I never had before. My body was sore in the best way possible, but it was a reminder that I was still capable, still alive, still worthy of joy. One morning, I sat on my balcony, watching the sun rise over the garden below. I had made my coffee just the way I liked it, and I breathed in the fresh air. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. But as much as I was learning to rebuild, I knew the battle wasn't over. Grace and Richard weren't going to let this go quietly. The news spread quickly, what they had done to me. And in the weeks that followed, I began to receive calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some of them were relatives, some were old neighbors, even former co-workers who had heard the scandal. I knew this would be part of the fallout. I knew people would talk, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had already faced the worst, and I had come out stronger on the other side. One afternoon, I received a letter from the local newspaper. It was an invitation for an interview. They wanted me to share my story, to expose the truth of what had happened, to help other people who might be going through the same thing. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to make this public. I didn't want to rehash the pain. But then I realized something. This wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who had been made to feel small. It was about showing the world that even when they think they can break you, you can rise up. The day of the interview, I sat across from the reporter, a woman who listened with open ears as I shared everything about Grace, about the betrayal, about the legal battle. And when I finished, she smiled softly and said, "Margaret, this is a powerful story. It's one that needs to be heard." The article ran the next week. The headline read, "Mother Fights Back: How One Woman Took on Her Daughter's Betrayal and Won." I read it, sitting in my new apartment, tears in my eyes, not from sadness, but from pride. I hadn't just survived this, I had won. The fallout for Grace and Richard was swift and unforgiving. Their names were all over the news, their faces plastered across social media. The public backlash was intense. Richard lost his job, his reputation tarnished. Grace, too, faced the consequences, her co-workers distancing themselves, friends no longer willing to turn a blind eye to what she had done. They weren't the only ones who paid. Carol, the cousin who had helped them, lost her job at the county clerk's office. The investigation revealed a network of corruption, people who had been part of similar schemes against elderly citizens. Her involvement was part of a larger crackdown, and she was dismissed. But the satisfaction of seeing them fall wasn't what fueled me. It wasn't revenge. It was knowing that the truth had come out, that, despite all the lies, I had finally been able to reclaim my story. A year had passed since the storm had hit, since that first shocking moment when I realized that the daughter I had raised, the one I'd given everything for, had planned to take it all away. The days blurred together, but the lessons I learned from that time, the healing, it all became clearer. Sitting on my balcony one morning, the sun warm on my face, I thought back on everything that had happened, the betrayal, the pain, the tears, but also the growth, the strength I hadn't known I had until I had no choice but to find it. I had thought for so long that love meant sacrifice. I had thought that giving everything, even at the cost of my own well-being, was the mark of a good mother. But as I sat there now, looking out at the peaceful garden below, I realized that true love doesn't break you. True love doesn't steal your peace or your dignity. It doesn't expect you to lose yourself in the process. It doesn't come with a price tag. In the weeks that followed the interview, I had received messages from people who had been through similar struggles. Women who had been manipulated by their children, men who had been betrayed by their families. They all reached out to me, some with gratitude, some with their own stories of hardship. And I began to understand something I hadn't before. This wasn't just my fight. It was a fight for everyone who had ever been made to feel small, for everyone who had been forced into silence by the people they loved most. And I realized that I had been given a gift, in a strange, painful way, the chance to help others. I had joined the Golden Hope Foundation, volunteering to help seniors who had faced the same betrayal and mistreatment I had. Together, we fought to protect the rights of those who had been taken advantage of, and I became something I never imagined I'd be. A voice for the voiceless, a support system for those who had lost everything. One afternoon, as I sat in a meeting at the foundation, I realized how much had changed. I had spent my life giving, sacrificing, until I had nothing left to give. But now, I was choosing to give from a place of strength, not weakness. I was choosing to protect my peace, my dignity. I wasn't just surviving. I was living. It wasn't easy. There were days when I missed Grace, when I remembered the little girl she had been, the moments we shared. But I had learned that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for them. Sometimes loving them means letting them go. Sometimes it means drawing boundaries and saying, "Enough. I won't let you hurt me anymore." And in the silence that followed, I began to find something new. For the first time, I was truly free.